Hey, what's up, guys? I've received a bunch of questions and comments about the gear that I have here, all painted up recently. Some people wanting me to do it for them, and some people just wanting an explanation of how I did it. I'm not really looking into getting into business doing this for people. It is a lot of work and effort to get all the parts prepped and painted, so I figured I would just show you kind of how I went about doing it so you can either do the same thing or something similar. So let's start out with the Taranis here. It's a little bit simpler than the goggles. So in order to paint this, you're going to have to take it fully apart to get the best finish possible. I mean, it's possible to do it with taping parts up, but it's really not worth it in my opinion. It's going to be more work in the long run. It's going to come out sloppy. So you can do one of two things. You can either paint the entire case, including this back black piece, or you can just do the front silver part. I opted to just do the front part. I think it looks a little bit classier, not having a big blob of one color, but it's really up to you. So in order to start this, you're going to have to completely disassemble the entire radio, which means taking it apart, taking the switches out, taking the gimbals out, taking the screen off. You're also going to have to take these 2 rows of buttons off, which are plastic welded on, so you can kind of just snap them up with a screwdriver, and then later when it's time to put them back, you can use a soldering iron to reattach them to the plastic pins that are there. So once you have it all taken apart, it really becomes all about prep work. You can use a Brillo pad or high grit sandpaper to scuff up the entire surface, but make sure you get into all the cracks and crevices. If you can see here, this is an important part where paint tends to not stick in all the sharp corners and everything. So spend the time, do it right, and you will be happy with the end product. So the paint that was used on this is automotive paint. I had it painted in a body shop next to where I work. So they do adhesion promoter for plastic surfaces, followed by primer, followed by color, followed by clear, and then they bake it. So that's obviously the best route to go if you're going to do paint. You could also dip it, hydro dip it, followed by a clear coat. Lucky Legacy is a really good guy to do that. He does some really nice dip work. If you're interested, hit him up. He's on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, other than that, that's pretty much all I've done to this, other than I got these carbon inserts, which are actual real like 0.5 carbon or something really thin from a Loft Hobbies. They have these pre-cut out, and he recommends that you use spray glue to attach them. That's the way that I went about doing this one. And then I had this sticker of my last name, call sign, laser cut by a guy in Canada. But yeah, so this one is stuck on with spray glue, and then these two are actually just held on with the switches. So there's no glue or anything, they're just screwed down with the switches, and that's been working pretty well. Lastly, the final thing that I have done on here is I tinted the screen with 5% auto tint. So if I turn, it's a little bit smudged right now, but if I turn this on here and hold it up to the camera, you can see when I turn it on, it shines through fine. And if you look really, really close, you can kind of see, maybe not on camera, but the labels for the buttons. I've learned which one goes where, so it's not a big deal for me, and also I use the same model for most of my stuff, so it's not really a big deal, but I think it adds to the classiness, gets rid of that Taranis in orange down at the bottom, and finishes the look pretty nicely. Alright, so moving on to the goggle side of things, again, you're going to have to fully disassemble your goggles to get such a nice painted finish with no flaws or anything. Again, it is possible to do it with some of the parts still attached, but it's not going to come out as nice, it's not going to last as long, and you're not going to be as happy with it in the long run. So this here is my pair of Dominator V2s that I've been using for about 2 years now, and they've been great for me. At first I was using them with the module from TBS, just the single-sided module, and then when LaForge came out a bunch of months ago, I switched over to that, the V1 with the V1 Diversity. I decided that I wanted to paint these a couple weeks ago when I did my Taranis, so I started taking them apart, and basically what you have to do is snap the faceplate off like normal, disassemble the 2 halves of the case, take the modules out, take all of the boards out of the inside, and then as well you have to remove the IPD sliders at the bottom, and the best way to do that is inserting a small flathead screwdriver between the inside plastic and the little white retention clip that's in there, and then just push up from the bottom on these little sliders and they should pop right out. I didn't have any issue, but one of my buddies did break one of the clips when removing it, so just be careful that you don't apply too much force. So again, once you have all of the parts disassembled and you know what you're going to want to paint, it's time to start prepping. So basically the surfaces that you're leaving as stock, you can just rub down with a Brillo pad. If you're taking down any words or you want to smooth anything out, on this pair I actually left the Fatshark up here on the faceplate, but on my HD3s I sanded that down to a smooth finish. Also, this pair of goggles didn't have any labeling on the ports and buttons down here, but my HD3s did. I sanded that all down to a smooth finish as well. And I used 400 and 600 grit sandpaper for that. The goggle halves, I recommend that you, if you're going to get rid of the Fatshark black lettering under here, it may show through in the paint. I took that down with 600 grit sandpaper. Same thing with the copyright logo that is on the bottom of all the goggles. So in terms of painting the main parts, that's about it. It's not too much work, just a little bit of roughing up to get it ready to stick to the paint. But then the real custom parts are the doors for the LaForge, and that's really what people have been interested in. So I'll start with showing you this one here. This is the first one that I did, and this is for the V1 LaForge, which is the one with the scroll wheel, which has worked great for me. I still have it. I just recently upgraded to the V2, and I haven't really even tried it out much yet. But so basically, this is a 3D printed part that I downloaded from Thingiverse and printed in PLA. You can see here all the different layers. And what I did to get it to this finish, you can see there's a little bit of a chip in the paint there from screwing in the SMA. Live and learn, make that a little bit bigger so that the SMA doesn't rub against it. But so basically what I did here is body worked it to a finish so that it could be painted and match the rest of the goggles. And that can be done one of a lot of ways. You can use fiberglass, you can use resin, you can use Bondo, a bunch of different types. This one I actually started with bumper Bondo, which is the black flexible stuff for repairing car bumpers. So I smoothed it on, kind of got it down to the shape that I wanted, and then continued with higher and higher grit sandpaper until it was nice and smooth. As I kind of got through that process, I found that changing the bumper Bondo in very small increments is kind of hard, and you need something a little bit stiffer to get that really, really clean finish. So I started using really thin CA glue or super glue and stuff called micro balloons. So basically this is comparable to using baking soda and super glue, which creates like a really nice cement form. And you can use the baking soda or micro balloons to build up a surface and then use the CA glue to finish it off and really harden it up. So I finished this one that way and then had it painted, and it came out pretty nicely. It worked well. I'm just not using it right now because I have the V2 in these goggles, and the HD3s are not really working too great for my eyes, so I've put them aside for now and kind of just focused on these ones. This door here is a nice example of what a finished painted surface should look like. Very nice and glossy. All of the edges are finished. You can see in this hole here it's very nicely rounded where the SMA goes. And this is for the V2 diversity module, which I also have, but I like the SMA coming out towards the center of the goggles. I think it looks a little bit cleaner, and it's the same hardware, so no big difference there. So let's look at the actual goggles now with the doors I have on here. So this is the V2 LaForge. Same thing, I 3D printed this door, and it took me probably about 3 or 4 days of a bunch of hours each day just working on this, sanding it, looking at it in the light, adding some more CA glue, and this was all done with just CA glue and micro balloons. So this was a print that I found on Thingiverse, and these edges here were much more harsh. They were really just right angles, no curvature to them at all. So I took those down with a Dremel first before I did anything, and then I continued to really shape it up and get the actual smoothness that I wanted with the CA glue and micro balloons. I ended up filling in the IR hole because I don't use those UBAD video transmitters, so I filled that up, smoothed over it, really made sure this one was going to be perfect because I knew it was going to be one that I was using for a long time, and I'm really happy with how it came out. It snaps in perfectly, really lines up to the goggles nicely. And then on this side, I'm actually in the process of making another door. I filled this in with CA glue and micro balloons. This is the old AV port because I have the V1 diversity in here, which doesn't fit with that AV port there. So basically this is just sitting in here. I'm making a new door with a slightly offset hole to center this better, and I'm refilling this with a backing so that it won't rise during the heating process of baking in the kiln for car paint. So that's something you want to be aware of if you're filling in a big gap with that CA glue stuff that I was talking about before. If you heat it above like 150 degrees, it will start to bubble up. So definitely glue a piece of thin plastic on the back, something to support it when it's in the baking process. That's something I did on the next revision of doors that I did, and it worked totally fine. I didn't have an issue. So as you can see here, I moved the AV port up here, and that works totally fine. I like how that looks. It really cleans up the door. So once I have that new door, I'm also going to fix this little, if you can see, that moves a little bit. That's because when I first did the LaForge mod, when these were still white, I glued the module in and then had to kind of modify the door around that. I found it better to just leave the module floating in there and get the door to clip in over it, and then it retains it in there pretty well. I think that's about it. Let me see here. What else did I do? Alright, let's just talk about these top stickers really quick. So you can order from Next FPV, I believe is the company. They're in Australia, I think. They sell all of the spare parts for the Fatsharks, which is really nice. So you can get the blue stickers, you can get the gray stickers, you can get the shells, you can get the straps, you can get the fan covers, you can get the replacement doors. So if you mess anything up, that's a really great resource. You can get a new one, so don't be too scared. And also if you just need replacements, it's really nice. So you can get these stickers off depending on how old they are without ruining them, and can reuse them. In this case, obviously these goggles were 2 years old and it left a lot of the adhesive behind when I peeled them off, and plus I wanted the gray ones. I wasn't initially going to do this carbon fiber, I thought of it later, but I wanted to use the gray ones because I thought it would go better with the color scheme. So I ordered the HD2 stickers, which are the gray ones from Next FPV, and they fit perfectly on here. It really finishes up the look with adding the white buttons instead of just having little circuit boards exposed underneath. And then I decided, since I have the carbon fiber on my Taranis, that it would be a cool touch to overlay some carbon fiber stickers on this. So the way I figured out was the best, cleanest way to do this was to take some carbon fiber 3M sticky vinyl and basically just lay a big piece that covers this entire area where the sticker would go. This is a spare shell. This is from my HD3s I'm not using, so you're probably going to mess it up with the razor blade, so I wouldn't recommend doing this on one that you're going to be using later on. But basically, so lay carbon fiber over the top and then flip it over on a table and use an X-Acto knife to cut out each buttonhole, and that will line it up really well and make sure that they're going to overlay the original stickers nicely. So once you have those holes cut out, then you can peel that off and line it up to the original stickers and cut out the actual shape. And then once you have that done, they'll overlay just like that.